Hello guys, welcome to Phoenix What If. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto awakened Dragon Slayer magic and got married with Erza Scarlet? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Rift over the Red Eddy. The afternoon sun, warm and benevolent, slanted through the wide windows of the Hokage's office, painting long stripes of gold across towers of paperwork that threatened to conquer the desk. For another man, this might have been a prison of parchment and ink. For Naruto Uzumaki, it was the quiet, tangible proof of peace. Each signed trade agreement, each mission report detailing nothing more than a lost cat. Each mundane request for civic funding was a brick in the foundation of the world he had fought and bled to build. The air tasted of tranquility, a flavor he had once only dreamed of. It smelled of old paper, the sharp scent of ink, and the faint, distant aroma of grilling meat from a yakiniku restaurant down the street. It was perfect. He dipped his pen, the scratching sound a steady rhythm against the gentle hum of the village outside. His movements were no longer fidgety or restless. The boundless energy that had once defined him was still there, a thermonuclear core deep within his chest. But it was now a controlled burn, a quiet furnace that fueled a patient, unshakable presence. The bright orange jumpsuit was long gone, replaced by the formal white and red robes of his office and the iconic hat that rested on a stand nearby. He wore the responsibility of the title not as a crown, but as a comfortable cloak, earned and familiar. Another stack from the capital. A lazy voice drawled from the doorway. Naruto didn't look up, a small smile touching his lips. Don't just stand there, Shikamaru. Your signature is needed on the Junin rotation schedules. Shikamaru Nara, his advisor and oldest friend, sighed with the practiced weariness of a man burdened by the world's competence. He ambled in, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, and slumped into a chair opposite the desk. Troublesome. You know, when we were kids, I never pictured you being the one to chain me to a desk. You chained yourself to it the moment you became the smartest man in the village, Naruto countered. Finally looking up, his eyes, a blue so deep they seemed to hold the sky, were clear and sharp. They held none of the childish naivete of his youth, but all of the warmth. Besides, I'm the one sorting through proposals for a new sewer line under Sector 4. You're just signing off on who gets the easy D ranks this month. Shikamaru grunted, picking up a scroll. Don't underestimate the political minefield of D-rank assignments. Give Team 10 too many dog-walking missions and Ino will have my head. A comfortable silence fell between them, filled only by tea. The rustle of paper and the scratching of pens. It was in these moments of profound normalcy that Naruto felt the victory of the war most keenly. It wasn't in the grand monuments or the history books. It was in the quiet work of a peaceful afternoon. Then, the world held its breath. It was a sensation only the most sensitive could feel. The hum of the village didn't just quiet, it was stolen. The air pressure dropped, making Naruto's ears pop. His pen stopped, hovering an inch above a request for festival permits. Kurama, a silent, titanic presence coiled within him, stirred not with alarm, but with a deep, primal curiosity. He was on his feet before Shikamaru had even registered the change, his gaze fixed on the sky outside his window. What is it? Shikamaru asked, his lazy demeanor vanishing, replaced by the razor-sharp focus of Konoha's chief strategist. Something's wrong, Naruto said, his voice a low hum. The air, it feels thin, brittle. Outside, a few civilians were already pointing towards the sky. What had been a flawless cerulean canvas was now marred by a flicker, a distortion like heat haze on a summer road. But this was no heat haze. The flicker intensified, coalescing into a thin, dark line. The color of a day-old bruise. It was as if someone had taken a divine scalpel and made a delicate, tentative cut in the fabric of the world. The cut began to tear. A sound followed, not a sound for the ears, but for the soul, a low, tearing scream of stressed reality. The hairline fracture widened, spider webbing outwards, the bruised purple deepening to a violent, angry violet. Panic began to ripple through the streets below. Anbu, Shikamaru's voice was a sharp crack in the sudden tension. Seal the perimeter. Get the civilians to the shelters. Code Red Protocol. Shinobi were already moving, Blurs of motion leaping across rooftops, their faces grim. Kakashi Hatake appeared on the roof opposite the Hokage Tower in a swirl of leaves, his single visible eye wide. With a gravity Naruto hadn't seen on his former teacher in years. Naruto didn't need to be told. He was already moving, shrugging off his formal robes to reveal the simple black shirt and pants beneath. He didn't reach for his hat. This wasn't a job for the Hokage. This was a job for Naruto Uzumaki. Get everyone clear, Naruto ordered, his voice resonating with an authority that left no room for argument. I'll handle the rift. He vanished from the office, not in a puff of smoke or a swirl of leaves, but as if he had simply stepped forward and the world had blurred around him. He reappeared, on the sculpted head of his own likeness on the great stone monument, the wind whipping at his spiky blonde hair. From this vantage point, he could see the full, terrifying scope of the event. The rift was no longer a crack, it was a gaping, screaming wound in the sky, a maelstrom of chaotic light and impossible colors. It pulsed with an energy that felt utterly alien, a discordant shriek against the familiar hum of chakra and nature energy. And then, from its depths, something was vomited forth. It was a thing of nightmare, a creature of glistening black chitin and too many limbs, its form a blasphemy against natural law. It was larger than Gamabunta, its silhouette edged with a sickly purple aura that sizzled in the clean air of his world. It let out a guttural roar, a sound that shattered windows and sent waves of primal fear crashing over the village. But Naruto's eyes were locked on something else. Just ahead of the creature, tumbling end over end, was a figure. A flash of silver armor, a glint of steel, and a spill of the most vibrant scarlet hair he had ever seen. A person, a woman, she was falling, plummeting towards the village from a height that guaranteed a grisly end. There was no hesitation, no strategic calculation. There was a person in danger. Everything else was secondary. He launched himself from the monument, a golden comet against the bruised sky. An aura of searing, clean heat erupted around him. Not the bubbling, malevolent red of his youth, but a pure, blinding gold, like the surface of a star brought to heal. His blue eyes bled into a reptilian gold, his pupils contracting into sharp, vertical slits. The air around him didn't just heat up, it shimmered, warping under the sheer pressure of his power. He moved with a speed that made the world a smear of color, closing the distance to the falling woman in a single heartbeat. She was unconscious, or close to it. Her magnificent armor was dented and cracked, one of her pauldrons shattered. A trickle of blood ran from her temple, a stark crimson against her pale skin. Even falling through a tear in reality, pursued by a monster from the void, she had a sword clutched in her gauntlet. A warrior to the very end. Naruto's arms enveloped her, his immense power banked to a gentle, steady warmth. He cradled her against his chest, her armored form surprisingly light, and arrested their fall, hovering effortlessly in the air. The monster, its attention now fixed on the new, brilliant source of power, let out another enraged roar and charged, its many legs clawing at the air. Down below, Sakura H. Aruno was already directing a medical team, her eyes wide with horrified awe. Lord 7th, Sakura-chan. Naruto's voice cut through the chaos, calm and absolute. Catch. With a gentle push, he say. NT Erza's unconscious form drifting down towards the waiting medics. He didn't wait to see her caught. He trusted his friend implicitly. He turned his full attention to the abomination descending upon his home. The creature was fast, its bulk defying its speed as it dove, a maw of needle-like teeth gaping wide. It was an S-rank threat, easily. Maybe higher. It radiated an energy that felt corrosive. Something that would poison the very land it touched. Naruto remained perfectly still in the air, a lone golden figure against the terrifying beast. He watched its descent, his slitted eyes calculating, cold. He took a deep, deliberate breath. The air itself seemed to rush towards him, drawn into his lungs. The golden aura around him flared, growing so bright that the shinobi on the ground had to shield their eyes. The heat intensified 1,000-fold, becoming a palpable, crushing force. He did not form a hand sign. He did not gather a ball of chakra. He simply opened his mouth and unleashed hell. It was not a roar of sound, but a roar of light. A torrent of coherent sunlight, a solar flare given form and purpose, erupted from his lips. It wasn't the wild, explosive force of a tailed beast bomb. It was a focused, concentrated beam of pure, annihilating power. The beam struck the charging monster dead center. There was no explosion, no grand impact. There was only light. The creature's guttural roar was cut off, replaced by a silent, incandescent scream. Its chitinous body, which could likely weather any ninjutsu, simply ceased to exist. It was not burned, or blown apart. It was vaporized, unmade, erased from existence in a fraction of a second. The beam of golden fire continued its path, lancing up into the violet rift. The chaotic energies of the portal shrieked as they were touched by the sun fire. And the entire structure convulsed violently before snapping shut with a final, echoing crack of thunder. Then, silence. The only thing left was a trail of dissipating golden motes and the faint smell of ozone. The sky was once again a perfect, peaceful blue. Naruto floated in the empty air for a long moment, the golden aura receding back into his skin, his eyes fading back to their normal blue. He took another breath, this one slow and steady, and descended, landing softly on the street below. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 30 seconds. The shinobi of Konoha stared, utterly dumbfounded. They had seen Naruto Uzumaki perform miracles. They had seen him tame tailed beasts, fight gods, and save the world. But this was different. This wasn't the power of the nine tails they knew. It was something more ancient, more fundamental. It was the raw, untamed power of a star, wielded with the precision of a scalpel. Kakashi appeared at his side, his visible eye impossibly wide. Naruto, what was that? A problem, Naruto said simply, his gaze already on the medical tent where Sakura was barking orders. And it brought a guest. He strode towards the tent. The crowd of stunned shinobi parting before him like water. He commanded not with his voice, but with the sheer weight of his presence. He was their Hokage, their hero, but in that moment, he was something more. He was a force of nature, and his storm had just passed. Inside the makeshift medical station, Sakura worked with frantic efficiency. She had managed to remove the woman's damaged gauntlets and chest plate, revealing a simple white tunic underneath. Her vitals are erratic, Sakura said, not looking up from her diagnostic jutsu. A green glow enveloped her hands as she scanned the unconscious woman's body. She's suffering from severe magical exhaustion. Wait, magical. Sakura's brow furrowed in confusion. Naruto, her energy system is all wrong. It's not chakra, it's something else entirely. It flows in a different pattern, and her body is saturated with these particles. I've never seen anything like it. Can you heal her? Naruto asked, his voice low. I can stabilize her, Sakura replied. Her focus absolute. I can treat the physical wounds, lacerations, deep bruising, a minor concussion, but her energy, it's like trying to fix a river that flows uphill. I don't understand the system. Naruto knelt beside the cot, his gaze falling on the woman's face. In repose, with the grime and blood being gently wiped away by a medic, her features were strong and noble. A face that had seen its share of battle, but held an underlying, fierce beauty. That hair, that impossible scarlet, was fanned out on the pillow like a spill of molten rubies. He felt a strange resonance with her, a kinship he couldn't name. It was the feeling of one caged titan recognizing another. Hours bled into one another. The village, though shaken, returned to a state of tense normalcy. Why under Shikamaru's calm and efficient command? The official story was a high-level experimental jutsu gone awry. Only a select few knew the truth. Naruto remained at the hospital, a silent vigil outside the private room where the mysterious woman was being treated. Kakashi had tried to send him back to his office, but Naruto had refused with a simple shake of his head. He had brought her into this. He would see it through. A council was held in hushed tones in the hospital waiting room. Kakashi, Shikamaru, and Sakura gathered around Naruto. Sasuke's on his way back, Shikamaru reported, his face grim. He was on the border of the land of wind when it happened. He said he felt it. A tremor in space-time. He wants to examine the area where the rift closed. Good, Naruto nodded. If anyone can make sense of this, it's him. The bigger question, Naruto, Kakashi said, his arms crossed, is her. Who is she? Where is she from? And what in the world was that monster? And what was that jutsu you used? Sakura added, her voice a mixture of awe and clinical curiosity. That wasn't a tailed beast bomb. It wasn't sage art. Your chakra signature felt different. Hotter. Naruto met their gazes. A flicker of something ancient and powerful in his eyes. It's a long story. A side effect of my bond with Kurama evolving after the war. It's not ninjutsu. He looked towards the door of the woman's room. And I have a feeling she might understand it better than any of us. As if summoned by his words, a nurse hurried out. Lord Hokage, she's waking up. Naruto was through the door before the nurse had finished her sentence. The woman was stirring, a low groan escaping her lips. Her eyes fluttered open, a deep, beautiful brown, but they were filled with disorientation and pain. Her warrior's instincts kicked in instantly. She tried to sit up, her hand flying to her hip where a sword should have been. Finding nothing, her eyes darted around the room, assessing, categorizing, searching for threats. They finally landed on Naruto, who stood a respectful distance from her bed. Her gaze was sharp, analytical. She saw the powerful set of his shoulders, the calm confidence in his posture, the faint residual warmth that seemed to radiate from his very being. She saw a warrior, but one unlike any she had ever known. Where am I? Her voice was raspy, but it held a core of steel. It was a commander's voice. You're in a hospital in the village of Konohagakure, Naruto answered, his tone even and calm. He took a small step forward and held up his hands in a universal gesture of peace. You're safe. She eyed him warily. Konohagakure. The name was alien. I don't know this place. Who are you? My name is Naruto Uzumaki. I'm the Hokage, the leader of this village. He gestu, read to the glass of water on the bedside table. You were falling. I caught you. Her eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of memory crossing her face. A maelstrom of violent color. The horrifying visage of the ether beast. And then, a blinding, golden light. A warmth that had felt like the sun itself wrapping around her. The beast, she began, the amalgam. It's gone, Naruto said simply. I took care of it. Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly. The amalgam was a creature that had taken half a dozen S-class mages to even contain. Took care of it, she thought. Just like that, she studied him again, her gaze lingering on the faint aura of power he couldn't quite conceal. It wasn't like the wizards she knew. It wasn't Ethernano. It felt wilder, yet more controlled. It felt like life itself. I am Erza Scarlet, S-class mage of the Fairy Tale Guild, she said, her voice gaining strength. It was a declaration, a statement of identity in a world where she had none. And I demand to know by what means I was brought here. Naruto met her fierce gaze with a calm one of his own. He saw past the warrior's pride and the defensive posture. He saw a brave, terrified woman stranded in a strange land. A world away from everything she knew and loved. He saw a kindred spirit. I don't have all the answers, he admitted, his honesty disarming. A rift opened in our sky. You and that monster came through it. I sealed the rift, but I don't know how to open it again. He paused, his expression softening. But I give you my word, Erza Scarlet. As long as you are in my village, you are under my protection. We will figure this out. Together. Erza stared at him, at the absolute sincerity in his deep blue eyes. Protection. She was Titania, a queen among warriors. She didn't need protection. And yet, the way he said it wasn't patronizing. It wasn't the offer of a stronger man to a weaker woman. It was a statement of fact, an extension of alliance from one powerhouse to another. For the first time since she had awoken, some of the tension eased from her shoulders. She was still lost, still a world from home, but as she looked at the blonde-haired man who shone with the quiet intensity of the midday sun, she had a feeling she wasn't entirely alone. Far away, in a desolate, windswept desert, another man stood where the rift had been felt. His black hair whipped across his face, his single visible eye. A Rinnegan of impossible power, staring at the empty sky. Uchiha Sasuke could see what others could not. He saw the scar tissue left on the skin of reality, the faint, lingering echo of a wound that had bled foreign laws into his world. This was not the work of Kagaya. This was not the power of the Otsutsuki. This was something new, something that resonated with the same cosmic wrongness he had sensed from the God Tree, but with a different, discordant melody. He felt the faintest trace of the woman's energy, and the overwhelming, searing signature of Naruto's. The two energies, they hadn't just coexisted. They had resonated, creating a harmonic that vibrated on a level that made his teeth ache. He had to return to Konoha. Now, the age of peace was over. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. A Night in the Land of Shinobi. The sterile white of the hospital room was a prison more galling than any dungeon Erza had ever been confined in. She was a creature of steel, open skies, and the glorious chaos of battle. The quiet, antiseptic peace grated on her nerves. She sat stiffly on the edge of her bed, clad in a plain cotton yukata the medics had provided, feeling unnervingly vulnerable without the familiar weight of her armor. Her swords, which had been recovered from the street, were placed carefully in the corner of the room, a gesture of respect she appreciated, but one that only highlighted her current helplessness. Sakura Haruno, the pink-haired medic with the formidable presence, was a whirlwind of professional curiosity. She would enter every few hours, her hands glowing with a gentle green light, and run them over Erza's body, her brow furrowed in concentration. "It's fascinating," Sakura murmured, more to herself than to Erza, during her morning examination. "Your entire cellular structure is permeated with these ether nanoparticles. They aren't just a fuel source you draw upon. Like chakra, they're an integrated part of your biology. It's like every cell in your body is a tiny magical battery." Quote. Erza remained stoic, though the clinical assessment made her feel like a specimen under glass. "It is the nature of a mage's power. But it's so inefficient from a chakra standpoint," Sakura continued, her mind racing. "A shinobi's body produces chakra, uses it, and then replenishes it. Yours seems to passively absorb this energy from the very atmosphere. When you're exhausted, you don't just need rest, you need to be in an environment rich with this magic." She looked up, her green eyes sharp. "Our world has almost none. You're healing, but it's a slow, uphill battle. Your body is starving." The diagnosis hit Erza with the force of a physical blow. It explained the deep, gnawing exhaustion that clung to her bones, a weariness that sleep could not banish. She was a fish out of water, slowly suffocating in an alien atmosphere. Frustration, a hot and bitter emotion she rarely allowed herself, began to boil in her chest. She needed to feel her own strength, to reassure herself that she was still Titania, still Erza Scarlet. Focusing inward, she reached for the familiar, comforting link to the pocket dimension where she stored her arsenal. She pictured it, the armory of her soul, filled with gleaming steel and polished leather. She called upon a single piece. Requip. A shimmering blue light enveloped her body. The two medics assisting Sakura yelped in shock and stumbled backward. Sakura herself took a defensive stance, her fists clenched. In a flash of light, the simple yukata was gone, replaced by her iconic Heart Crew's armor, a polished steel cuirass, blue skirt, and greaves. The familiar weight settled onto her shoulders like a comforting embrace. Power, her own power, surged through her, a welcome tide against the encroaching exhaustion. "What was that?" one of the medics stammered, pointing a trembling finger. "A space-time jutsu." Erza rose to her feet, feeling more herself than she had in days. "It is my magic." Requip. The night, just as the tension in the room reached a breaking point, the door slid open. Naruto Uzumaki stepped inside, a simple tray of food in his hands. He took in the scene at a glance, the startled medics, Sakura's defensive posture, and Erza standing defiant in full armor. He didn't seem surprised. He simply offered a small, disarming smile. "I had a feeling you wouldn't be a fan of the hospital gowns," he said, his voice cutting through the tension. He placed the tray on the bedside table. On it was a steaming bowl of soup and a slice of what looked suspiciously like strawberry cake. His eyes met hers, and for a fleeting moment, she saw an understanding that went beyond words. "I thought you might want a tour of the village. It's better than staring at these four walls, right?" Sakura relaxed, shaking her head with a sigh. "Naruto, she's not cleared for. She's a warrior." "Sakura-chan," Naruto interrupted gently, his gaze still on Erza. "The worst thing for a warrior is to feel caged. A walk will do her more good than any bed rest." He turned his full attention back to Erza. "What do you say?" Erza looked from Naruto's open, honest face to the slice of cake. A small, almost imperceptible warmth bloomed in her chest. He had seen past her armor, past the title of Titania, and understood the woman beneath. He had seen her frustration and offered her freedom. And cake. I will accept your offer, Lord Hokage, she said, her voice formal, though the edge was gone. Just Naruto is fine, he said with a grin. Come on. There's a lot to see. Walking through Konoha was like stepping into a dream. Erza's world was one of bustling port towns, grand medieval cities, and vast, untamed wilderness. This village was different. It was a sprawling metropolis that seemed to have grown organically from the forest itself, a perfect fusion of nature and civilization. Buildings climbed the trunks of colossal trees, and streets wound around ancient root systems. The air was clean, and filled with the scent of wood smoke and blossoming flowers. But it was the people who truly captivated her. They smiled. They greeted Naruto not with the formal deference due a king, but with the familiar, genuine affection reserved for a beloved brother or son. Children would run up to him, and he would crouch down, ruffling their hair and listening to their stories with rapt attention. Shopkeepers would call out, offering him free samples, which he would accept with a booming laugh. He was woven into the very fabric of this place, not just as its leader, but as its heart. They love you, Erza observed, her voice quiet. She was respected in Magnolia, even loved by her guildmates, but this was a different kind of bond. This was universal. We've all been through a lot together, Naruto replied, waving to an elderly woman watering her plants. Family looks out for each other. His words struck a chord deep within her. Family. That was the word for fairy tale. The anchor of her entire existence. He led her to the base of the Hokage monument, and she craned her neck back, her eyes widening at the sheer scale of it. 4 immense faces carved into the mountainside, silent stone guardians watching over the village. A 5th, his own, was the most recent addition. The leaders who came before me, Naruto explained, his voice holding a note of reverence. They laid the foundation that I'm trying to build on. She saw it then, the immense weight he carried. It wasn't just the paperwork she'd glimpsed in his office. It was the legacy of these stone faces, the love of these people, the peace of this entire world. His power wasn't for conquest or glory, it was a shield, protecting this fragile, beautiful thing he had helped create. And she, a foreign element, was now a potential threat to it all. The thought was a cold stone in her stomach. As if sensing her disquiet, Naruto's expression grew serious. Erza, I know this is a lot. But you're not a threat here. You're a guest. Before she could reply, the world changed. The cheerful chatter of the village square below them faltered and died. The warm afternoon sun seemed to dim, its light thinning as if filtered through gray glass. A profound, unnatural silence fell, broken only by the wind. Every shinobi in the vicinity froze, their heads snapping up towards the sky. In the center of the village, the air began to shimmer, not with heat, but with a cold silver luminescence. The light coalesced, solidifying not into a person, but into a concept given form. It was a humanoid figure, 7 feet tall, composed entirely of polished, seamless silver light. It had no face, no features, only a smooth, impassive surface that reflected the muted colors of the world around it. It radiated an aura of absolute, unshakable order, a presence so sterile and logical that it felt like a violation. In a flash of black, a dozen Anbu operatives appeared, surrounding the being, kunai drawn. Identify yourself, the captain commanded, his voice tight with tension. The silver being did not move. Its voice, when it came, was not spoken. It simply existed, resonating in the minds of everyone present, calm and toneless, like a mathematical equation. Less than I am Solon. I am an arbiter of Ordis. Greater than. What is your purpose here? The Anbu captain demanded. Less than a causality violation has occurred. A foreign body has integrated with this reality stream. The dissonance creates instability. I am here to correct the error. Greater than. Naruto and Erza were already moving, landing in the square in a blur of motion. Naruto positioned himself slightly in front of Erza, a subtle, protective gesture that did not go unnoticed. The being, Solon, turned its faceless head towards them. It regarded Naruto for a fraction of a second, as if cataloging him, before its focus settled entirely on Erza. Less than the anomaly. It must be excised. Its existence here is a wound upon the manifold. I am the surgeon. Greater than. A cold dread, an emotion Erza rarely felt, washed over her. This being wasn't here to fight. It was here to erase her. Naruto's posture didn't change. His friendly demeanor was gone, replaced by the quiet, absolute authority of the Hokage. She is no longer an anomaly, he stated, his voice ringing with power in the silent square. Erza Scarlet is under the protection of Konohagakure. If you want her, you go through me. Shikamaru, Kakashi, and Sakura arrived, taking up positions behind Naruto. The message was clear. An attack on one was an attack on all. Solon seemed to process this information. There was no anger, no frustration. Only logic. Less than your protection is irrelevant. The integrity of reality supersedes local authority. The excision will proceed. Greater than. With no warning, Solon raised a hand. A beam of pure white light, devoid of heat or sound, shot towards Erza. It moved with impossible speed, but Naruto was faster. He appeared in its path, his hand outstretched, a swirling sphere of brilliant blue chakra, a Rasengan, forming in his palm. He met the beam head-on. The result was something no one expected. The Rasengan, a jutsu capable of grinding through solid steel, simply dissolved. It fizzled out into nothingness a foot before it even touched the beam. The chakra within it neutralized. The beam continued, and Naruto was forced to twist his body, the light searing past him, leaving a perfectly sterile, cauterized line in the ground behind him. Less than your energy system is incompatible with ordained law. It is nullified in my presence, greater than Solon's voice echoed. Less than resistance is illogical. Greater than. Naruto landed, a grim look on his face. Shikamaru. Analysis. It's not absorbing the jutsu, it's unmaking it, Shikamaru said, his mind working furiously. It's projecting some kind of field that breaks down the nature of chakra itself. Solon raised both hands this time. The air around Naruto warped, and he was suddenly encased in a translucent cube of shimmering force. Naruto's eyes widened. The vibrant golden aura he constantly suppressed flickered. The familiar connection to Kurama, a link as natural to him as breathing, felt strained. His sage mode markings, which he could summon in an instant, failed to form. He was cut off. Naruto, Kakashi shouted, his hand already moving to lift his headband. It's no use, Shikamaru yelled. It's a null chakra field. He's trapped. From inside the cube, Naruto could feel his primary power source being choked off. He was still a highly skilled shinobi, but without his chakra, he was just a man against a godlike entity. Solon turned its attention back to Erza, who now stood alone. Its hand began to glow. Erza's eyes narrowed. Her fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, familiar fury. She would not be a burden. She would not be a damsel to be protected. She was an S-class mage of fairy tale. She would fight her own battles. She took a step forward, her hand reaching for the hilt of a sword she did not have, her mind already preparing to re-equip into her most powerful offensive armor. Then, from within the cube, a sound came. It was a low chuckle. All eyes snapped back to Naruto. He was standing calmly inside his prison, a defiant smirk on his face. He looked at Solon, his blue eyes glinting with a dangerous light. You're right about one thing, Naruto said, his voice easily carrying through the barrier. Chakra doesn't work on you. He closed his eyes. But who said that's all I have? He took a deep breath. And the world caught fire. The null chakra field, designed to suppress the energy of the shinobi world, had no defense against what came next. A cataclysmic eruption of pure, golden power exploded from within Naruto. His hair seemed to ignite, his skin taking on the incandescence of a star. His eyes snapped open, no longer blue, but the molten gold of a dragon, pupils sharpened to predatory slits. Good thing I've got more than one trick, he snarled, his voice a low growl. His fists, wreathed in roaring solar fire, slammed into the walls of his prison. This wasn't chakra, it was something else, something wilder, more primal. It was the raw, untamed magic of a sun dragon. The null chakra field, which could negate any ninjutsu, shattered like glass against a power it could not comprehend. Naruto was free. The sheer heat and pressure of his presence forced everyone, even Kakashi, to take a step back. Solon, for the first time, seemed to pause, its impassive form flickering as if in surprise. Less than impossible, a secondary energy system, a paradox, greater than. You talk too much, Naruto growled. He vanished, appearing directly in front of Solon and unleashing a furious barrage of punches and kicks. Each strike was wreathed in golden flame, and each impact produced not the sound of flesh on light, but the clang of a celestial hammer striking a cosmic anvil. He was no longer fighting like a shinobi, with feints and jutsu, but like a berserker, a force of pure, overwhelming offense. Solon was driven back, its silver form dented and flickering under the relentless assault. It was a being of pure law, of cold logic. It could not process this beautiful, chaotic rage. Desperate, Solon brought its hands together, and the light around it condensed, forming a sphere of absolute blackness. A hole in the world that seemed to drink the very light from the air. It wasn't an energy attack, it was a conceptual one. A sphere of pure nullity that didn't destroy, but erased. Less than ceased to exist. Greater than the Arbiter commanded, launching the sphere at Naruto. Naruto was in midair, having just launched a fiery axe kick. He couldn't dodge in time. He braced himself, his golden aura flaring. But he didn't have to face it alone. No, a guttural scream ripped from Erza's throat. In that split second, her decision was made. A brilliant flash of light enveloped her. Requip. The Heart Crew's armor vanished, replaced by a suit of impossibly thick, bulky green metal. Her adamantine armor, the ultimate defense, a shield that had reputedly never been broken. She appeared between Naruto and the sphere of nothingness, her two massive shields locking together to form an impenetrable wall. She gritted her teeth, planting her feet and pouring every ounce of her dwindling magical energy into the defense. Erza. Naruto's shocked cry was lost as the sphere of nullity made contact. There was no sound, only a profound, sickening pressure. The air buckled, the very ground beneath Erza's feet groaned. Cracks, like black lightning, spider-webbed across the surface of her legendary shields. She felt a force not of impact, but of uncreation, trying to pull her apart atom by atom. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. Her arms screamed in protest. Her vision swam with black spots. But her feet did not move. Her shield did not fall. She was Titania. She was Fairy Tail's shield. And she would not break. The sphere dissipated, its energy expended against an immovable object of pure, unyielding will. Erza wavered, her armor groaning under the strain, but she held. That single moment was all Naruto needed. Solon had expended a vast amount of its power on the attack, its silver form now dimmer, less stable. And its focus was entirely on the impossible woman who had withstood oblivion. It did not see the golden star descending from above. You hurt my friend. Naruto's voice was a low, deadly whisper from right behind its head. He had gathered the roaring sun fire around his right fist, compressing it, folding it in on itself until it was no longer a chaotic flame but a point of blinding, perfect light, a miniature sun held in his palm. Sun Dragon's blazing fist. He drove his fist into the back of Solon's head. The impact was absolute. A wave of golden light and superheated plasma erupted outwards, silent and devastating. Solon's form, a being of pure law and order, was subjected to the pure, untamable chaos of a star's heart. Its silver body convulsed, cracked, and then shattered into a million motes of fading light. A final, fading whisper echoed in the minds of Naruto and Erza alone. Less than the weaver sees the wound. The dissonance will not be tolerated, others will follow, greater than. Then, it was over. Silence returned to the square. Naruto landed softly, his golden aura receding, his eyes fading back to their familiar blue. He rushed to Erza's side just as her adamantine armor dissolved in a flash of light, leaving her in her standard armor once more. She swayed, her face pale, and he caught her before she could fall. "You idiot," he said, his voice a mixture of anger, relief, and profound awe. "You could have been killed." Erza looked up at him, a faint, defiant smile on her lips. "And let you have all the fun," she countered weakly. The assembled shinobi of Konoha stared, speechless. They had just witnessed their Hokage unleash a terrifying new power, and they had seen a strange, foreign knight stand against a divine force to protect him. Respect, pure and simple, shone in their eyes as they looked at Erza. She was no mere guest. She was an ally. Later that evening, the moon hung high and full over a peaceful village. Erza stood on the stone head of the fourth Hokage, gazing down at the sea of lights that was Konoha. The air was cool, and for the first time, she felt her body slowly, almost imperceptibly, drawing in a faint trace of energy from the world around her. Naruto's energy, the lingering solar magic that now saturated the very ground where he had fought, was a feast for her starving cells. Thought I'd find you up here, Naruto's voice came from behind her. He walked up to stand beside her, his hands in his pockets. For a while, they stood in comfortable silence, two warriors sharing a moment of peace. Thank you, Erza said finally, her voice soft. For everything. You don't have to thank me, he replied, looking out at the village. You stood your ground for me. You didn't even hesitate. No one's done that for me in a long time. It is the duty of comrades to protect one another, she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. He turned to her, a genuine, curious smile on his face. You really believe that, don't you? With all my heart, she affirmed. My guild, fairy tale, they are my family. I would stand against any god for them. I would burn the world down to keep them safe. Naruto's smile widened. He understood that. He understood it on a level so fundamental it was part of his soul. He looked from her fierce, determined profile to the village he had sworn to protect. A village full of people he would burn the world down for. My village is my family, too, he said quietly. My precious people, all of them. In that moment, under the silent gaze of the moon and the stone gods of this village, the gap between their worlds shrank to nothing. She was not Erza Scarlet, a mage from Fury. And he was not Naruto Uzumaki, the Hokage. They were just two people who had found in each other a mirror of their own deepest conviction, that the bonds you forge are the only things worth fighting for. The respect they had for each other as warriors began to warm, to deepen, into something else entirely. Something new, something powerful. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Path to Fury. The week following the battle with Solon was a period of tense, focused energy. The village was safe, but the Arbiter's final, chilling promise, others will follow, hung over them like a drawn executioner's axe. The problem was no longer simply about getting Erza home, it was about survival. The Weavers, or whatever cosmic entity Solon served, had declared war on their very existence together. Hiding was not an option. They had to go on the offensive. The decision was made in the Hokage's office, a room that had seen more high-stakes strategy sessions in the past week than in the last 2 years of peace combined. Present were Naruto, Erza, Kakashi, Shikamaru, Sakura, and the last, crucial piece of the puzzle, Sasuke Uchiha. Sasuke had arrived the day after the battle, appearing in a swirl of dust and static on the edge of the village. His presence was a stark contrast to Naruto's warmth. He was a creature of shadow and silence, his single dark eye and the terrifying, rippling purple O.F. his Rinnegan absorbing the light around him. He moved with a predatory grace, the tattered black cloak he wore on his journeys swirling around him like a storm cloud. He had listened to the reports from Naruto and the others without comment, his expression unreadable. Then, he had turned his full attention to Erza. His gaze was not hostile, but it was unnervingly intense, his Rinnegan seeing far more than just her physical form. It saw the Ethernano in her veins, the conceptual space of her requipped magic, the faint scar tissue on her soul left by the Tower of Heaven. Erza met his scrutiny without flinching, her own warrior's senses telling her that this man was every bit as powerful as Naruto, but in a colder, sharper way. He was a blade where Naruto was a fist. The Arbiter was right about one thing, Sasuke had said, his voice a low baritone. Your combined presence creates a resonance. Naruto's energy. He glanced at his friend. This new Sun Dragon power, it's not just a different form of chakra. It's a foreign import, a system of power that originates from the same place as her magic, grafted onto our world's laws of nature through the Jinchuriki seal. When you two are near each other, your energies harmonize. It's like ringing a bell on a cosmic scale, and whatever the Weaver is, it can hear it. The implications were staggering. It wasn't just Erza's presence, but Naruto's very nature that was causing the instability. Now, they faced the fallout of that revelation. We can't just wait for the next Arbiter to show up and lay waste to the village, Naruto said, his hand steepled on his desk. The playful youth was gone, replaced entirely by the 7th Hokage. His voice was calm, but it held the unyielding weight of command. They are targeting Erza, and by extension, anyone who protects her. The next one might not be something we can beat with a fistfight in the town square. It might be an army. It might be a plague. We don't know their methods. So, what's the alternative? Kakashi asked, leaning against a bookshelf. We can't run. We can't hide. We take the fight to them, Erza stated, her voice firm. She stood beside Naruto's desk, her arms crossed over her armored chest. She had become a fixture in these meetings, her tactical mind and otherworldly experience proving invaluable. My world, Fury, has experts in dealing with cosmic and magical threats. The knowledge in fairy tales archives alone could give us an advantage. More than that, if this weaver is a threat to the stability of reality, my guild and my country have a right to know. They need to be prepared. Shikamaru sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. That's a sound strategy, but it runs into a very troublesome wall. Namely, the wall between dimensions. We don't know how to cross it. The first rift was an accident. And your fight with Solon didn't exactly leave a door open. All eyes turned to Sasuke. He had been silent, staring out the window at the village, his back to the room. I can do it, he said, without turning around. My Rinnegan grants me the ability to traverse dimensions. I have used it to track the remnants of Kagaya's power. He finally turned, his gaze locking with Naruto's. But it will not be simple. This isn't like opening a door to one of Kagaya's sealed worlds. Those are fixed points, already linked to this reality. Erza's world, Earth-Land, is adrift. It's a completely separate existence with its own physical laws. Tearing a hole to it would be a violent, uncontrolled act. It would be just as dangerous as the first rift. So, what do we need to make it stable? Naruto asked, cutting to the heart of the matter. We need two things, Sasuke explained, holding up a finger. First, a key, a precise coordinate. I can't aim for a world I can't see. I need a lock to turn. Erza's own magical signature is the strongest link we have. She would have to act as a beacon, focusing her energy to give me a target. Erza nodded sharply. I can do that. Second, Sasuke continued, his expression growing grim, we need power. An immense, overwhelming amount of it. Tearing the hole is one thing. Holding it open and keeping it stable long enough for you to pass through without being shredded by the dimensional shear is another. My own chakra, even with the Rinnegan, is not enough. I would be torn apart. A heavy silence filled the room. The plan seemed to have hit an insurmountable obstacle. What if you didn't use just your own chakra? Naruto asked quietly. Sasuke's eye narrowed. What are you suggesting? You're the one who said it, Naruto said, leaning forward. My power and Erza's, they resonate. It's a colossal source of energy. What if you used me as the battery? Sakura shot to her feet. Naruto, no, we have no idea what that would do. Forcing that much of your energy, that unknown energy, through Sasuke's Rinnegan could destroy you both. It could blind him permanently, or worse. It's a risk I'm willing to take, Naruto said, his gaze fixed on Sasuke. He wasn't asking for permission. He was stating his decision. It's the only way. Sasuke stared at his old rival for a long, silent moment. He saw no fear in Naruto's eyes, only grim resolve. He saw the same reckless idiot who had chased him across the world, the same man who would shoulder any burden, pay any price, to protect his friends. And he saw something else. The raw, staggering power of the Sun Dragon, a power that even he, with the eyes of a god, could not fully comprehend. It was a well of energy so deep it seemed infinite. The strain would be immense, Sasuke warned. Even for you. And for Erza, acting as the beacon will drain every last drop of her magic. She'll be completely vulnerable. I trust you to protect me, Erza said simply, looking at Naruto. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of faith. Naruto met her gaze, and a silent understanding passed between them. And I trust you to guide us home, he replied. The decision was made. The plan was set. And the preparations began. Naruto had to do something he hated, delegate. For 3 days, he was a whirlwind of motion, formally handing over the reins of the village to Kakashi as acting Hokage. With Shikamaru remaining as his chief advisor. He met with the clan heads, the Junin commander, and his own former teammates, explaining the necessity of his absence without revealing the full, terrifying cosmic scope of the mission. He told them he was embarking on a top-secret, S-rank mission with Sasuke to investigate the source of the dimensional instability, a mission vital to the village's long-term security. They trusted him. His word was enough. During this time, Erza underwent a different kind of preparation. She spent hours with Sakura, who, despite her misgivings about the plan, was determined to ensure Erza was as prepared as possible. Sakura taught her basic field medicine, how to identify and use shinobi rations, and, most importantly, worked with her to understand her own dwindling energy. Think of it like this, Sakura explained, holding up a diagram of the chakra network. A shinobi has a full tank of gas. We use it, and then we rest to refill it. You landed here with a nearly empty tank, and the gas stations in our world sell the wrong kind of fuel. You've been running on fumes, and what you're about to do is the equivalent of flooring the accelerator until the engine seizes. I understand the risks, Erza said, her jaw tight. I know you do, Sakura said softly, her expression softening. That's why I'm giving you this. She handed Erza a small, sealed scroll. It's a soldier pill, but modified. It won't give you energy, but it will flood your system with nutrients and stimulants to keep your body from shutting down after you're drained. It's a last resort. Only use it if you absolutely have to. Erza accepted the scroll, a silent thank you in her eyes. The bond between the two women, forged in mutual respect for each other's strength and dedication, had solidified into a quiet friendship. The final night before their departure, Konoha was quiet. Naruto found Erza in one of the training grounds, standing before a row of battered wooden posts. She wasn't training, just standing there, lost in thought. Nervous? He asked, coming to a stop beside her. No, she replied immediately. Then she sighed, a rare admission of vulnerability. Perhaps a little. I have faced death many times. I am not afraid of it. But I am anxious to see my home. To know that it is safe. To see my friends. Naruto nodded in understanding. He thought of his own friends. Of the village that was now his whole world. I get it. He hesitated for a moment. Then a classic, mischievous Naruto grin spread across his face. Come on. Before we do something incredibly stupid and possibly reality-breaking, there's one more place I have to show you. He led her not to a grand monument or a place of strategic importance, but through the winding, familiar streets to a small, unassuming stall with a simple white curtain over the entrance. The rich, savory aroma of pork broth and noodles washed over them. Ichiraku ramen, Naruto announced with a reverence usually reserved for sacred sites. The food of the gods. Inside, Chuki and his daughter Ayame greeted Naruto with a booming welcome. They looked at Erza with friendly curiosity, but if they found it strange that the Hokage was bringing an armored, scarlet-haired woman to their ramen stand at this hour, they didn't show it. They sat at the counter, and Naruto ordered 2 bowls of his favorite miso pork ramen. As they ate, the tension of the coming mission seemed to melt away in the warm, steamy air. It was a simple, profoundly normal act. A shared meal. Erza, who usually ate with a focused efficiency, found herself slowing down, savoring the rich, complex flavors. It was delicious. But more than that, it was the atmosphere. Seeing Naruto here, in his element, slurping down noodles with unabashed glee, arguing with Chuki over the perfect amount of char siu, she saw the boy he must have been. The lonely kid who found a home in this tiny ramen shop. It was a piece of his soul, and he was sharing it with her. So, Naruto said between mouthfuls, what's the first thing you're gonna do when you get back? Erza considered this. A small smile touched her lips. There is a bakery in Magnolia. They make the most exquisite strawberry cake. Naruto blinked. Strawberry cake. It is my favorite, she admitted, a faint blush on her cheeks. She felt strangely exposed, sharing such a simple, frivolous detail. But Naruto didn't laugh. He just smiled. Strawberry cake, he repeated softly. I'll have to try it sometime. The look that passed between them was charged with unspoken promises. It wasn't just about getting her home anymore. It was about seeing her home. About sharing that slice of cake. The simple, human moment solidified their connection more than any battle ever could. They were no longer just allies. They were friends. Maybe, just maybe, the seeds of something more. The next morning, at dawn, they gathered in a clearing deep within the forests outside Konoha. The location was chosen for its isolation. If something went wrong, the damage would be contained. It was just the four of them: Naruto, Erza, Sasuke, and Sakura, who had insisted on being there as a medic. The air was heavy with anticipation. "Are you ready?" Sasuke asked, his voice low and serious. Erza and Naruto nodded in unison. "Erza, find your center," Sasuke instructed. "Don't just think about your world. Feel it. Feel the magic in its soil, the energy of your friends, the taste of the air. Become an anchor, a lighthouse in the void between worlds. I need to be able to see your light." Erza closed her eyes. She shut out the scent of pine and damp earth of Konoha's forest and reached for the memory of fury. She pictured the salty tang of Magnolia's sea air, the boisterous lot. Echoing through the fairy tale Guildhall, the taste of her favorite strawberry cake. She focused on her requip space, the wellspring of her power, and let her magical energy flare, not outwards as an attack, but inwards. Concentrating it into a single, brilliant point of light in the core of her being. A faint, shimmering blue aura began to glow around her, visible even in the morning light. The effort was immense. Sweat beaded on her brow, and her hands, clenched into fists at her sides, began to tremble. Sasuke's Rinnegan flared to life, its tomo spinning. "I see it," he breathed, his voice filled with awe. "A tiny spark in an infinite darkness. It's faint, but it's there." He turned to Naruto. "Now, I'm going to open the tier. The moment I do, you have to pour your power into it. Don't hold back. Give me everything you have. Your energy will act as the frame, preventing the doorway from collapsing in on itself." Naruto nodded, his expression set. He closed his eyes and reached deep inside himself. Not for Kurama's chakra, but for the other, hotter power that now coexisted with it. He felt the slumbering dragon stir, a consciousness of pure fire and sun, and welcomed its power. Sasuke's hands flew through a series of complex, one-handed seals. He thrust his hand forward, palm open. Amanamanaka. Reality buckled. The air in front of Sasuke did not tear or rip, it bent. Space twisted in on itself, and a small, black fissure, no bigger than a kunai, appeared in the air. It was a point of absolute wrongness, a wound that hissed with the sound of static and escaping pressure. "Now, Naruto," Sasuke roared, blood beginning to trickle from the corner of his Rinnegan. The strain was already immense. Naruto's eyes snapped open, blazing with golden fire. The sun-like aura exploded from him. A physical wave of heat that sent Sakura stumbling back. A colossal, seemingly endless river of golden energy, raw and untamed, poured from his body and streamed into the tiny black fissure. The effect was instantaneous and violent. The fissure, fed by the paradoxical energy of the sun dragon, convulsed. It began to grow, stretching and widening, the edges glowing with a furious violet light. The sound of tearing reality grew to a deafening roar. The very ground shook. Trees at the edge of the clearing began to splinter and groan under the dimensional strain. "It's not enough," Sasuke grunted, his body trembling with effort. "It's unstable. It's fighting me. Don't worry about me, Sasuke." Naruto yelled over the din, his own body now glowing like a miniature sun. "Just hold it open." He shoved more power into the breach, a torrent that seemed to have no end. The Kurama-sized reserves he was famous for were nothing compared to this. This was the energy of a celestial body, channeled through a mortal man. The portal stabilized, solidifying into a shimmering, vertical oval of swirling purple and blue light, a chaotic mirror showing glimpses of a world that was not their own. Erza staggered, a gasp escaping her lips. The connection was established. The drain on her magic intensified 100-fold. Her vision grayed at the edges. "Go," Sasuke shouted, his voice strained. "I can't hold it for long." Naruto didn't hesitate. He scooped Erza up into his arms, her body now feeling terrifyingly light. She was barely conscious, her focus entirely on maintaining the beacon. "Sakura-chan," he yelled. "We'll be back, I promise." With a final look at his friends, at the world he was leaving behind, Naruto Uzumaki leapt into the swirling vortex, taking the Night of Fury with him. The moment they were through, Sasuke collapsed to one knee, severing the connection. The portal shrieked and snapped shut, leaving behind only the smell of ozone and a profound silence. Sasuke panted, his hand clamped over his bleeding eye. The sheer volume of Naruto's power he had channeled was terrifying. It was like trying to direct a tsunami through a garden hose. His entire arm throbbed with residual energy. "Are they?" Sakura asked, rushing to his side, her hands already glowing with healing chakra. Sasuke looked at the empty space where the portal had been. He could no longer feel their presence. They were gone. "They're through," he said, a note of grim respect in his voice. "Now it's up to them." He looked down at his trembling hand. That idiot. What in the world has he become? Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. Titania and the Sun Dragon. The journey between worlds was not a journey at all. It was a violent, sensory assault. For Naruto, who had leapt through the portal carrying Erza, it was like being plunged into a maelstrom of pure, unrefined creation. There was no up or down, no sound or silence. There was only a chaotic flood of color, light, and raw, untethered emotion. He felt the brush of a billion nascent thoughts, the echoes of forgotten songs, the bitter taste of ancient sorrows, and the brilliant, blinding joy of stars being born. It was the entire universe screaming into his mind at once. His sun dragon nature, a power born of chaotic, life-giving energy, allowed him to weather the storm. He held on to Erza, his body a living shield against the cosmic turbulence. His own golden aura a solitary point of order in the madness. He focused on the single, unwavering pinprick of light that was Erza's soul, the beacon she was still projecting with the last dregs of her strength. It was his only guide, his North Star in an ocean of insanity. The transit lasted an eternity and no time at all. Then, with a lurch that felt like his soul being slammed back into his body, they were spat out. They fell. The air was thick, humid, and tasted of salt and something else, something vibrant and alive. Magic. It saturated the atmosphere, a low, thrumming hum that made the hairs on Naruto's arms stand on end. His own draconic senses drank it in, a starved man finding an oasis. Below them, a city sprawled along the coast, a chaotic and beautiful jumble of architectural styles. All centered around a grand, cathedral-like building with whimsical, soaring spires. Magnolia. They were still high above the ground, plummeting towards the city square. Erza was limp in his arms, her consciousness finally having succumbed to the absolute exhaustion of her task. The blue aura around her was gone. Naruto adjusted his grip, angled his body, and prepared for a gentle, chakra-controlled landing. But his body, now in an environment thick with the very magic that fueled his draconic side, reacted instinctively. A surge of raw power, drawn from the atmosphere itself, coursed through him. Instead of a soft landing, he hit the stone plaza with the force of a small meteorite. Boom! The ground cratered beneath him, spider webbing outwards for 20 feet. Dust and debris shot into the air. He stood in the center of the impact zone, completely unharmed, still holding Erza protectively. He blinked, looking down at the destroyed cobblestones in surprise. Whoops, he muttered to himself. Guess I'm a little stronger here. The bustling city square fell into a stunned silence. Merchants, shoppers, and local wizards stared, mouths agape, at the blonde man, who had literally just fallen from the sky and smashed a hole in their plaza. He was a figure of contradictions. His clothes were strange, simple black garments that marked him as an outsider, yet he held the legendary Titania, Erza Scarlet, in his arms as if she weighed nothing. "It's Erza," someone finally shouted, breaking the spell. "She's hurt," another cried. The crowd surged forward, a wave of concerned citizens and guild mages. But before they could get close, a new sound cut through the air, a roar. Not of a beast, but of pure, unadulterated excitement. "I smell a fight." A figure shot out from the crowd like a cannonball. He was a youth with wild pink hair, a checkered scarf wrapped around his neck, and a grin that was all teeth and joyful aggression. His fists were wreathed in roaring flames. You're the one with the weird, hot smell." The pink-haired kid yelled, his eyes sparkling with manic glee. "You look strong. Fight me." This was Natsu Dragneel, and his approach to new and interesting phenomena was always the same: punch it. Naruto, still holding Erza, barely had time to register the bizarre newcomer before Natsu was upon him. Fire Dragon's iron fist. Natsu roared, launching a blazing punch aimed squarely at Naruto's face. Naruto's reaction was pure instinct. He didn't have time to put Erza down. He simply shifted his weight, his head tilting a fraction of an inch to the side. Natsu's fiery fist, which could melt steel, grazed past his cheek, the heat washing over him like a pleasant summer breeze. To Naruto, a being who could channel the heat of the sun, Natsu's fire felt like a candle. Naruto didn't even look at his attacker. His priority was Erza. He saw a blue-haired woman in the crowd, Levi Magarden, her face pale with worry. "Hey, you," Naruto called out, his voice easily cutting through the chaos. "She needs help. She's completely exhausted her magic." With a gentle, controlled movement, he tossed Erza underhand. It was the same move he'd used back in Konoha. An action born of absolute confidence in his own strength and the competence of others. Levi yelped but caught Erza with the help of a nearby gray fullbuster, who had, at some point, lost his shirt. The crowd swarmed around their fallen comrade, their attention momentarily diverted. Natsu, his punch having missed, skidded to a halt, his grin widening. "Whoa, you're fast. Now you have no excuse. Let's go." He charged again, his fists blazing. Naruto finally turned his full attention to the human firecracker. He felt a strange sense of nostalgia. This kid's energy, his reckless and head-on approach, reminded him of, well, himself, a long time ago. A faint smile touched Naruto's lips. This he could handle. He didn't move. He just stood there in the center of his crater as Natsu's fist flew towards him. This time, he caught it. His simple, open palm closed around Natsu's flaming fist, and the fire sputtered and died, snuffed out as if by a vacuum. Natsu's eyes widened in shock. No one had ever just stopped his fire before. He tried to pull his hand back, but it was caught in a grip of impossible strength. It felt like his hand was locked in a vice made of bedrock. "Not bad, kid," Naruto said, his smile genuine. "You've got a lot of spirit." His eyes, a deep and startling blue, seemed to glow with an inner light. "But you're picking a fight you can't win." "Oh yeah," Natsu roared, his pride stung. He opened his mouth wide. "Fire dragons." He never finished the incantation. Naruto, still holding his fist, simply tugged. Natsu, caught completely off balance, was yanked forward, his face planting squarely into Naruto's other hand, which was now glowing with a sphere of swirling, condensed golden energy. It looked like a miniature sun, crackling with power. It was not a Rasengan, fueled by chakra, but its magical equivalent, formed from the raw solar energy of his Dragon Slayer nature. Naruto didn't detonate it, he just held it there, an inch from Natsu's nose. The sheer heat and power rolling off it was suffocating. Natsu, a being made of fire, felt an instinctual, primal fear. It was the fear a candle feels in the face of a supernova. He could feel this golden energy trying to devour his own fire. "Let's calm down," Naruto said, his voice no longer light and friendly, but carrying a low thrum of absolute power. "I'm not your enemy." The standoff hung in the air, thick and tense. The surrounding crowd, which had been ready to jump in and defend Natsu, was frozen, mesmerized by the sphere of terrifying golden light. "Enough." The voice was old, but it resonated with a power that dwarfed everyone's in the square. The crowd parted respectfully, and a tiny, elderly man walked through. He wore a jester-like hat and a simple striped shirt, but his eyes held the wisdom of a century and a magical presence as vast and deep as the ocean. This was Makarov Dreyar, the 3rd, 6th, and 8th Guild Master of Fairy Tail. He stopped before Naruto, his gaze sweeping over the scene, the crater in the ground, the terrified look on Natsu's face, the golden sphere of unknown magic, and Erza, who was now being tended to by Wendy Marvell. His eyes, old and sharp, finally rested on Naruto. He felt it, the same thing Solon had. An impossible paradox, a power that felt draconic, ancient, and overwhelming, but one that was completely alien to their world. It felt like the sun had been given a soul and decided to take a walk. Naruto, sensing the authority of the old man, allowed the golden sphere in his hand to dissipate into harmless motes of light. He released Natsu's fist. Natsu stumbled back, rubbing his hand, his usual bravado gone, replaced by a mixture of shock and, for the first time in a long time, awe. "You will come with me," Makarov said to Naruto. It was not a request. Naruto looked at the old man, then back at Erza, who was beginning to stir in Wendy's healing embrace. He gave a slight nod. "All right, but she comes too. We don't get separated." Makarov's gaze softened slightly as he looked at Erza. Of course, my boy. You brought one of my children home. For that, you have my gratitude. He turned and began walking towards the Grand Guildhall. Now, come, we have much to discuss. The fairy tale Guildhall was exactly as Erza had described it, a place of beautiful, untamable chaos. Inside, it was even more so. Moss. Sieve Brawl was in full swing in the center of the main hall, with tables flying, wizards shouting, and magic of every description being thrown about with joyous abandon. No one seemed to be truly trying to hurt anyone. It was more like a destructive, guild-wide family reunion. Naruto stepped inside and simply blinked. He had seen brawls in Konoha, but they were nothing like this. This was pure, unadulterated pandemonium. And yet, it felt strangely familiar. It felt like home. Makarov leapt onto the bar, his small form somehow commanding the attention of the entire room. Quiet, you brats, he roared, his body suddenly growing to gigantic proportions, his shadow falling over the entire hall. The brawl stopped instantly. Everyone froze, turning to look at their master. Erza has returned, Makarov announced, his voice booming. A massive cheer erupted from the crowd. He then gestured a giant hand towards Naruto. And this young man brought her here. He is to be treated as a guest. His gaze swept the room, lingering for a moment on Natsu. And that means no more fighting. At least for the next 5 minutes. He shrank back to his normal size, and the atmosphere in the room shifted from chaotic to curious. All eyes were on Naruto. He stood there, calm and unfazed by the hundreds of powerful mages staring at him, and offered a simple, friendly wave. In a private room upstairs, the story was laid out. Naruto, with Erza occasionally interjecting as her strength slowly returned in the magically rich environment, explained everything. The rift, the shinobi world, the Hokage, the arbiters, the weaver of Ordis, the desperate plan to open a portal. Makarov, Gray, Lucy, Wendy, and a now subdued Natsu listened, their expressions growing grimmer with every word. So this, Weaver, Lucy said, her voice trembling slightly. It's a god-level entity that wants to erase Erza just because she was in your world. It seems to want to erase us, Naruto corrected gently. My power, this undragon magic, it seems to be part of the problem. Our existence together is what's causing the instability. The Weaver isn't just after her, it's after the paradox we represent. Makarov stroked his chin, his face a mask of deep thought. Dragon Slayer magic that comes from another world, a power that is not of the dragons, nor of the demons of Zirf, nor of the gods of Ishgar. You, my boy, are an unprecedented existence. He looked at Naruto, his old eyes sharp. And your power, it is immense. I have not felt anything like it since my encounters with Aknologia. The name fell into the room like a block of ice. Natsu, Gray, and the others flinched. Aknologia, the black dragon of the apocalypse, was a name synonymous with absolute destruction. To be compared to him was the highest, and most terrifying, of compliments. I'm not like him, Naruto said firmly, his expression hardening. I don't destroy, I protect. Before anyone could respond, the Guildhall doors burst open. The chaos downstairs, which had started to ramp back up, fell silent. A figure stood silhouetted in the doorway. He was tall, powerfully built, with blonde hair styled in a spiky faux hawk and a series of strange markings over his right eye. A black fur-trimmed coat was draped over his shoulders. This was Laxus Drayar, Makarov's grandson and one of the most powerful S-class mages in the guild. His eyes, cold and arrogant, scanned the room before landing on Naruto. So this is the guy who took down Natsu with one hand and has Gramps spooked, Laxus drawled, a condescending smirk on his face. Doesn't look like much to me. Natsu bristled. What did you say, Laxus? Laxus ignored him, his entire focus on Naruto. I hear you're some kind of dragon slayer. Sun dragon. He let out a short, mocking laugh. I'm a lightning dragon slayer myself. How about you show me what a little sunshine can do against a real thunderstorm? This was not a friendly challenge like Natsu's. This was a direct, arrogant provocation, a test of dominance. Naruto sighed. He was getting a little tired of this. Look, I'm not here to. Are you afraid? Laxus taunted, taking a step into the hall. Arcs of powerful yellow lightning began to crackle around his body. Don't worry, I'll try not to break you too badly. Wouldn't want Titania's new pet to get hurt. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Erza, who had been sitting quietly, rose to her feet. A murderous aura, dark and heavy, rolled off her in waves. Her eyes glowed with a terrifying light. What did you just call him, Laxus? Her voice was a low, deadly whisper. Laxus's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. He had gone too far. Even he knew not to provoke Erza like that. But before Erza could requip and beat her guildmate into a bloody pulp, a hand gently rested on her shoulder. It was Naruto's. It's okay, Erza, he said, his voice calm and steady. He gave her a reassuring squeeze, then turned to face Laxus. The friendly, easygoing demeanor was gone. His blue eyes were cold and clear as ice. All right, Naruto said, his voice quiet, yet it carried through the silent hall. You want a demonstration? Fine. He walked out into the center of the hall. The guild members scrambling to give him space. He stood opposite Laxus, who now had a full, crackling aura of lightning surrounding him. You get one shot, Naruto said calmly. Hit me with your best attack. Everything you've got. Laxus's eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed in anger. This outsider was mocking him. You'll regret this, he snarled. He brought his hands together. This is the power of a real dragon slayer. He thrust his hands forward. Lightning dragons roar. A colossal, raging torrent of pure lightning erupted from his mouth, a beam of destruct. I've energy that could pulverize solid rock. It shot across the hall, aimed directly at Naruto. The guild members braced for an impact that would surely blow the back wall off their building. Naruto didn't move. He didn't raise a shield. He didn't gather energy. He just stood there, and as the blast was about to hit him, he inhaled. The entire, massive blast of lightning, a force of nature that could power a small city, was drawn into Naruto's open mouth. It didn't hit him. It was consumed by him. In a second, it was gone, as if it had never existed. The hall was plunged into a dead, ringing silence. Everyone, including Makarov and a shell-shocked Laxus, stared with wide, unbelieving eyes. Naruto patted his stomach, a small burp escaping his lips. A tiny puff of static electricity fizzled from his mouth. Tastes a little spicy, he commented, a thoughtful look on his face. He then cracked his neck and gave Laxus a predatory grin. His eyes began to glow with golden light. My turn. Laxus felt a fear so profound it was instinctual. He was a predator, a dragon. But in that moment, he felt like prey. He realized, with dawning horror, that he had not provoked a rival. He had kicked a sleeping god. Before he could react, Naruto vanished. He reappeared directly in front of Laxus, his fist wreathed in the same terrifying solar fire that had cowed Natsu. He drove it forward, but he didn't aim for Laxus's head. He aimed for the floor at his feet. He didn't even make contact. He stopped his fist an inch from the floorboards. But the sheer force, the raw, compressed solar energy, was released. Whoom! A silent, concussive wave of golden energy and overwhelming heat erupted outwards. The floorboards in a 10-foot radius around Laxus were not burned or shattered. They were instantly vaporized, turned to fine ash. The shockwave threw Laxus off his feet, sending him tumbling backward to land in a heap at the far end of the hall, his lightning aura extinguished, his body unharmed but his pride utterly shattered. Naruto stood in the center of the circle of ash, the golden glow in his eyes slowly fading. He looked at the stunned and terrified faces of the fairy tale mages. He hadn't wanted to do that, but he knew, just as he had known as a genin, that sometimes, the quickest way to earn respect was through an undeniable demonstration of power. He walked over to where Erza stood. She was looking at him. Her expression a mixture of shock, awe, and something else, something warm and proud. Their gazes met, and in that moment, the entire guild, the entire world, seemed to fade away. After all the chaos, the fear, and the uncertainty, they had found their way here. Together. Later that night, after the guild had processed the day's shocking events and thrown a massive, chaotic feast in Naruto and Erza's honor, the two of them found a moment of peace on the guildhall's balcony, overlooking the moonlit city. You didn't have to do that, Erza said softly, referring to the confrontation with Laxus. Yes, I did, Naruto countered, leaning on the railing. Your friends are passionate. They needed to understand. I'm not a threat to them. But I am not to be trifled with, either. He turned to her, a small smile on his face. Besides, he was rude to you. A faint warmth spread across Erza's cheeks. She looked out at the lights of her home, her heart full. It is good to be back, she whispered. It's a good home, Naruto agreed. She turned to him, her brown eyes serious and full of a profound emotion he was just beginning to understand. Naruto, when I was in your world, you told me I was under your protection. You called me a guest in your village. She took a step closer, her gaze unwavering. Now you are in mine. You are not a guest here. You are one of us. You are Fairy Tail, and anyone who threatens you will have to face me, and this entire guild. It was a declaration, an oath sworn under the light of a foreign moon. Naruto looked into her fierce, loyal eyes and saw the same conviction that drove him. He saw a home not of land and buildings, but of the heart. He reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek. Her skin was soft beneath his calloused fingers. Thank you, Erza, he said, his voice barely a whisper. The space between them seemed to crackle with an energy more potent than any magic. It was the culmination of everything they had been through, two worlds colliding. Two souls recognizing each other across the void. Her breath hitched. His thumb gently stroked her cheekbone. It was an unspoken agreement, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had been forged in the heart of a dimensional storm and tempered in battle. In that moment, he was not the Hokage and she was not Titania. They were just Naruto and Erza. And that was more than enough. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Council's Judgment and the Shadows Game. The ripples of Naruto's arrival did not stop at the doors of the Fairy Tail Guildhall. They spread, first as head whispers among the merchants and minor guilds of Magnolia, then as formal reports flowing like rivers towards the new heart of the Magic Council in the city of Era. An unknown man, falling from the sky. The crater in the plaza. The utter humiliation of not one, but two of Fairy Tail's S-class dragon slayers. And, most alarmingly, the use of a power that no one could identify, a golden, solar fire that seemed to operate on principles entirely alien to Ethernano. In the grand, sterile halls of the new Magic Council building, a structure of cold white stone and sharp angles, built to project an image of unyielding order after the chaotic mess of the Tartaros incident, these reports landed on the desk of Chairman Org. Org was a new breed of leader. Unlike the previous council members, who we often ex-mages with a grudging respect for guild autonomy, Org was a bureaucrat. A man of flow charts, regulations, and absolute control. He saw the independent guilds not as quaint traditions, but as unpredictable variables in his equation for a perfectly ordered world. He saw Fairy Tail, with its history of collateral damage and blatant disregard for authority, as the most dangerous variable of all. He read the reports on Naruto Uzumaki with a growing sense of cold fury. An unregistered wizard of immense, unquantifiable power, appearing out of nowhere and immediately associating with the most problematic guild on the continent. It was a nightmare scenario. He consumed a lightning dragon's roar, Org muttered to himself, his fingers steepled before his face. He vaporized the guildhall floor without touching it. He brought Erza Scarlet back from wherever she was. He stood, pacing his cavernous office. This isn't a wizard. This is a weapon of mass destruction with a face. He is the ultimate loose cannon. And he's in the hands of Makarov Dreyar. His fear, cold and sharp, was a fertile ground. And in the shadows of his mind, a seed had already been planted. A voice, smooth as oiled silk and cold as the void, whispered in his thoughts. It was a voice he had come to trust over the past weeks, a wise and insightful advisor who had appeared to him in his private chambers, a being of pure thought and logic that called itself Prax. Less than your fear is justified, Chairman. The being known as Naruto Uzumaki is not just a threat to your authority. He is the focal point of a cosmic instability that threatens this entire plane of existence. Greater than the dimensional rifts, Org breathed. Reports of minor spatial distortions and strange atmospheric phenomena had been trickling in for weeks. Prax had been the one to connect them, to explain them as symptoms of a greater sickness. Less than precisely, greater than the voice purred. Less than he is the disease. His very presence here warps reality. You saw the reports from Magnolia. The sky itself shimmered when he arrived. He is a foreign body, and the world is developing a fever in response. If he is not contained, the fever will break, and this reality will shatter. Greater than. Contained. How? Org demanded. Fairy Tail protects him. Erza Scarlet stands by his side. They would go to war with the council before they handed him over. Less than then you must give them no choice, greater than Prax the Arbiter advised. Its tone patient and reasonable. Less than frame it not as a punishment, but as a necessity. Classify him under Council Statute 3.14, the Alien Entity Protocol. A Class 10 threat of unknown origin. His apprehension and study become a matter of continental security. To defy the order would be an act of treason against all of Fury. Not even Fairy Tail can stand against the entire world. Greater than. Org's eyes gleamed with cold resolve. It was perfect. It was logical. It was absolute. Prepare the order, he commanded the empty room. Dispatch a full battalion of the Rune Knights to Magnolia. This, Naruto Uzumaki, will be brought to Era. By force, if necessary. The news came not as a whisper, but as a thunderclap. A Rune Knight captain, clad in the council's impersonal plate armor, arrived at Fairy Tail's doorstep. A formal decree in his hand. He read it aloud in the suddenly silent guildhall, his voice amplified by a magical device. Naruto Uzumaki was declared a threat to national security. He was to surrender himself immediately for containment and study. Failure to comply would result in Fairy Tail's status as a legal guild being suspended, and all its members branded as criminals. The ultimatum hung in the air. Thick and poisonous. The first to react was Natsu. Like hell, he roared, his fists igniting. You wanna take him? You'll have to get through all of us first. A chorus of furious agreement rose from every corner of the guild. Kana Alberona brandished a handful of magic cards, Grey Fullbuster's hands began to frost over, and even Lucy summoned Leo, who AP. Paired with a crackle of celestial energy, his expression grim. The entire guild, a chaotic and dysfunctional family, was united in a heartbeat, ready to go to war for the man who had been their guest for less than a week. The Rune Knight captain, to his credit, didn't flinch. This is your only warning, Fairy Tail. Defy the council, and you will be crushed. Before the situation could explode into open battle, Naruto held up a hand. The gesture was simple, but it carried an undeniable authority that silenced the entire guild. It's okay, he said, his voice calm and steady. He looked around at the furious, loyal faces of his new friends, and a genuine, warm smile touched his lips. Thank you, all of you. He then turned to the Rune Knight captain. His smile was gone, replaced by an unnerving placidity. Tell your chairman that I will come to Era. I will speak with him. Naruto. No, Erza protested, stepping to his side, her hand gripping his arm. You can't. It's a trap. They won't just talk to you. They'll try to imprison you, to dissect you like a lab animal. I know, Naruto said, his gaze not leaving the captain's. But if I fight them here, I make you all fugitives. I bring a war to your home. That's not going to happen. He looked down at Erza, his blue eyes softening. I'm not a weapon for them to seize, and I'm not a disaster waiting to happen. I am Naruto Uzumaki. I'll make them understand that. He turned back to the Rune Knight. I will come, willingly, but I come as the 7th Hokage of Konohagakure, a sovereign leader, to meet with your chairman. Not as a prisoner. The captain, faced with this unexpected response, was at a loss. His orders were to apprehend a threat, not to escort a foreign dignitary. My orders. Your orders are to bring me to Era, Naruto interrupted smoothly. I am agreeing to go. The method of my arrival is a detail I'm sure your chairman will overlook, as long as I get there. He gave the captain a look that was both a promise and a threat. I will be there in 3 days. Alone. The captain, outmaneuvered and unsettled by Naruto's sheer force of personality, could only stammer an agreement before retreating with his soldiers. The moment they were gone, the guild erupted. Are you crazy? Gray shouted. You can't trust them. He's right, Naruto-san, Wendy whispered, her eyes wide with fear. The new council is not like the old one. They're cold, strict. Quote, Naruto let them vent, understanding their fear and their fierce loyalty. He let their protests wash over him until Makarov silenced the room with a raised hand. Let him speak, the guild master said, his eyes fixed on Naruto. I've faced down councils before, Naruto said, his voice resonating through the hall. I've faced down fear. This Chairman Org, he isn't acting out of malice. He's afraid. Of me. Of the unknown. You can't beat fear with fists. You can't punch a bureaucracy into submission. He smiled, a flash of the old, confident knucklehead. Why? Oh, you have to look it in the eye and talk to it. And if it doesn't listen, his smile widened, becoming predatory. Then you make it listen. Erza watched him, her heart a confusing mix of terror and profound admiration. This was the leader of the shinobi world. Not just a powerhouse, but a statesman. He was willing to walk into the lion's den, not to destroy it, but to tame the lion. It was the bravest, most reckless, and most Naruto thing she could imagine. And she would not let him do it alone. You will not go alone, she stated, her voice leaving no room for argument. I am an S-class mage of this guild. I have a right to stand before the council. I will go with you as Fairy Tail's representative. Naruto opened his mouth to protest, but he saw the look in her eyes. It was the same unshakable resolve he had seen when she shielded him from Salin's attack. It was the look of a knight standing her ground. Arguing would be pointless and disrespectful. He simply nodded. All right, then we go together. 3 days later, they stood before the imposing white edifice of the Magic Council. The air in Era was sterile, the streets laid out in perfect, uninspired grids. It was the complete opposite of the joyful chaos of Magnolia. Naruto felt like he was walking into a mausoleum. They were escorted not to a meeting room, but to the Grand Judgment Chamber. It was a vast, circular amphitheater, designed to intimidate. They stood alone in the center of the floor, while high above, seated in shadowy alcoves, were the 9 members of the council, with Chairman Org in the highest seat, his face a mask of stern neutrality. Naruto Uzumaki, Org's voice boomed, magically amplified. You stand accused of being a Class 10 existential threat. Your unauthorized entry into our world and your unquantifiable abilities represent a clear and present danger to the peace and stability of Ishgar. Naruto didn't look up. He kept his gaze level, his presence calm and centered. I stand here as a leader from another world, seeking to understand a threat that affects us both. I am not your enemy. Your very existence is the threat. Another council member shouted. The dimensional instability began with your arrival. This was the narrative Prax had carefully constructed. The instability began when a rift pulled one of my citizens into your world, Naruto countered, his voice rising to fill the chamber, no amplification needed. I came here to correct that, to find a way to prevent it from happening again. This weaver you seem so afraid of, it has already attacked my home. It has sent its agents to murder Erza Scarlet. It is the enemy, not me. Lies and deflections, Org declared. The arbiter that appeared in Konohagakure was a necessary response to a cosmic imbalance. It was a failsafe, not an aggressor. Naruto's head snapped up, his blue eyes locking onto Org's. A flicker of cold realization passed through him. How did he know about that? How did he know its purpose? The reports from Konoha couldn't have been that detailed. Someone was feeding him information. Someone who was there. Or someone who was on the Weaver's side. This wasn't a trial. It was an interrogation based on a pre-written script. They weren't afraid. They had been coached. It was then that Erza made her move. She had stood silent, a pillar of armored defiance, but now she stepped forward. Chairman Org, she said, her voice ringing with the authority of Titania. You speak of laws and statutes. Let us speak of them. By the Council's own laws, I, as an S-class mage, have the right to challenge the judgment of this body through a trial by combat. A shocked murmur ran through the council members. A trial by combat hadn't been invoked in over 50 years. Org's eye twitched. It was an archaic law. One he had assumed was long forgotten. But it was on the books. That law applies to the judgment of a guild member, Erza Scarlet. Naruto Uzumaki is not a member of your guild. Is he not? Erza replied, a dangerous glint in her eye. She turned to Naruto, and in front of the entire Magic Council, she reached up and took his right hand. She requipped a single, small item into her other hand. A wooden stamp bearing the insignia of the Fairy Tail Guild. Naruto Uzumaki, she said, her voice clear and strong, do you accept the principles of Fairy Tail? To cherish your comrades, to walk your own path, and to live your life to the fullest. Naruto looked down at her, at the absolute, unwavering trust in her eyes. He saw her gamble, a brilliant, reckless move to bind their fates together in the eyes of the law. He saw her standing up for him, fighting for him not with her sword, but with her heart. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face. "I do," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. With a firm press, she stamped the back of his right hand. A bright, scarlet fairy tale emblem appeared on his skin, a stark and vibrant mark of belonging. Then as of this moment, Erza declared, turning back to the stunned council, "I, Titania, an S-class mage and a candidate for the title of Guild Master, do hereby recognize Naruto Uzumaki as a member of Fairy Tail. Now, he is one of ours. And I invoke my right. I will be his champion. If you wish to condemn him, you must first defeat me." It was an act of open rebellion, wrapped in the letter of the law. She had called their bluff and raised the stakes to an impossible height. To fight Erza would be a political disaster. She was a hero to the people. To back down would be to admit defeat. Org's face was a thundercloud of pure fury. The silky voice of Prax whispered in his mind, "Less than this changes nothing. Let her fight. It will only serve to alienate her from the public when she defends the monster. Name your champion. Let the law play out." "Greater than." "Very well," Org snarled, his voice dripping with venom. "You wish for a trial by combat. You shall have it. The council accepts your challenge." He rose from his seat, his shadow falling over the chamber. "And your opponent, our champion, will be the strongest wizard in the 10 wizard saints." "God Serena." A gasp went through the hall. Even Erza's iron composure faltered. God Serena, the top-ranked wizard on the continent. A man said to possess the power of 8 different dragon slayer magics. He was less a man and more a living legend, a force of nature. To pit Erza against him was not a trial. It was a death sentence. Naruto's hand tightened on Erza's. He felt a surge of cold fury. They had gone too far. "Erza," he said, his voice a low growl. "Let me handle this." "No," she said, her grip on his hand tightening, her resolve like steel. "This is my fight. I made the challenge. I will see it through." She looked up at him, and in her eyes, he saw no fear, only a fierce, burning loyalty. "I told you, didn't I? Anyone who threatens you has to face me." The trial was set for the following day in the council's grand arena. As they were escorted to their quarters, the weight of what was to come pressed down on them. That night, in the quiet of their assigned room, the bravado fell away. Erza stood by the window, staring out at the cold, orderly city, her back to Naruto. He could feel the tension in her shoulders, the faint tremor in her hands. "He is the strongest mage in Ishgar," she said quietly. "His power is said to rival Aknologia's." "You don't have to do this," Naruto said, walking up behind her. "This is my battle. I can walk out of here right now and take you with me. We can fight them on our own terms. And live as fugitives," she countered, turning to face him. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears of frustration. "Force our friends to become outlaws. That is not victory, Naruto. That is exile." She took a ragged breath. "I have to do this. For the guild. For you." Quote. He saw the crushing weight she was putting on herself, the immense burden of her own loyalty. He had seen that look in the mirror 1,000 times. He reached out, his hands gently taking her armored shoulders. "You're not alone in this, Erza." His voice was soft, but it held an unshakable conviction. "You stood for me today. You risked everything. You made me part of your family." He looked down at the red guild mark on his hand, then back up at her. "I've never had someone fight for me like that. Not with words. Not since I was a kid who had no one." His vulnerability was a raw, open thing. It cut through her armor, through her titles, and struck at the very core of her heart. "You're not that kid anymore," she whispered, her own hands coming up to rest on his chest. "I know," he said, his voice thick. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. "Because I have you." The world narrowed to the space between them. The looming threat of God Serena, the council, the weaver, it all faded away. There was only the warmth of his hands on her shoulders, the solid feel of her armor beneath her hands, and the shared rhythm of their breathing. He tilted his head, and his lips met hers. It was not a kiss of passion, but of profound, resonant gratitude. It was a kiss of shared burdens, of unspoken understanding. It tasted of salt from her tear, and of the ozone from his lingering power. It was the kiss of two lonely warriors who had finally, against all odds and across dimensions, found their other half. A sun dragon and a fairy queen, Santa. Nding together against a world that sought to tear them apart. When they broke apart, the fear was still there, but it was no longer overwhelming. It had been replaced by a quiet, shared strength. Tomorrow, she said, her voice steady now, I will show them what it means to threaten a member of Fairy Tail. Naruto smiled, a fire lighting in his own eyes. And I'll be right there with you. Every step of the way. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Weaver's Lore and Arrival's Respect. The morning of the trial dawned cold and gray, the sky over air the color of unpolished steel. The atmosphere in the city was electric, a mixture of morbid curiosity and grim anticipation. A trial by combat for a Class 10 threat, with Titania Erza Scarlet as champion against the nigh mythical god Serena. It was the stuff of legends. And the entire city seemed to hold its breath. In the grand arena, a colossal stone amphitheater that could hold 50,000 spectators, the stands were packed. Mages, nobles, and common citizens had gathered to witness the historic confrontation. High in the dignitaries' box, Chairman Org sat with a smug, reptilian satisfaction. This was the perfect outcome. If God Serena won, the alien threat would be legally contained and Fairy Tail humiliated. If, by some impossible miracle, Erza won, the council would have a legal precedent to declare her and her guild an even greater threat. It was a flawless political maneuver. Deep beneath the arena, in the stark waiting chamber, the mood was far more somber. Erza stood in the center of the room, her eyes closed in meditation. She was already clad in her Heart Crew's armor, but the air around her shimmered as she mentally cycled through her arsenal, preparing for a battle that would demand everything she had and more. Naruto paced the room like a caged tiger. The quiet waiting, the inability to act, was a unique form of torture for him. He trusted Erza's strength implicitly, but he knew what she was facing. He had sensed God Serena's power the moment the name was spoken, a chaotic, arrogant storm of 8 different draconic signatures, all warring with each other within one vessel. The man was a monster of power, but he was unstable. A weapon without a master. That, Naruto knew, made him even more dangerous. There's another way, Naruto said, stopping his pacing to face her. The moment that gate opens, I can have you out of here. We can be halfway across the continent before they even realize what happened. We find a quiet place, I teach you Sage Mode, you have the control for it, and we come back and deal with them on our terms. Erza's eyes opened. They were calm, clear, and absolutely resolute. And what terms are those, Naruto? To live as fugitives. To force our friends to choose between their home and us. Your power can shatter mountains. But it cannot shatter laws. My magic can cut through steel, but it cannot cut through public opinion. This is the only way to win not just the battle, but the war for our right to exist here, together. Quote, he saw the unshakable logic in her words, the same logic that had led him to face his own village's hatred head-on rather than run from it. She was right. He hated it, but she was right. I just don't like it, he grumbled, shoving his hands in his pockets. I'm supposed to protect you. You are, she said, walking over to him. She stood before him, her expression softening. By trusting me, by letting me fight my own battles, for my own reasons. She reached up and adjusted the collar of his simple black shirt, a small, intimate gesture. I am not fighting just for me, or for the guild. I am fighting for that, she said, her finger gently tapping the red fairy tail mark on the back of his hand. For our family, for you. The conviction in her voice was a physical force. It settled the raging storm inside him. He looked down at her, at the fierce loyalty burning in her eyes, and felt a surge of overwhelming pride. How had he gotten so lucky? Find a spirit so perfectly in tune with his own, a world away from everything he had ever known. The heavy stone door to the arena began to grind open, flooding the dim room with bright light and the roar of the crowd. It was time, Erza, he said, his voice low and urgent. He grabbed her hand. I know you have your armors. Your knight. But his power is different. It's chaotic. It's the magic of 8 different dragons. Don't just try to block it. Don't just try to overpower it. He met her gaze, his blue eyes intense. Confuse it. Overwhelm it. Your requip is faster than his shift in magic. Use that. Be the storm he can't predict. It was the advice of one master warrior to another. She squeezed his hand, a silent acknowledgement and a thank you. I will. And one more thing, he said, a dangerous glint in his eye. He leaned in and whispered something in her ear, a short, simple sentence. Her eyes widened in surprise, then a slow, dangerous smile spread across her lips. That, she murmured, is a brilliant idea. She turned and walked into the light of the arena, her back straight, her head held high. She was not just a champion, she was a queen walking into her court. Naruto watched her go, his fists clenched at his sides. He couldn't fight for her, but he could damn well be there. He placed 2 fingers to the floor, closed his eyes, and sank into the stone, using a basic Earth-style technique to move silently through the arena's foundations, positioning himself in the shadows of a lower archway, a perfect, unseen vantage point. The arena was a sea of noise. Erza walked to the center of the sandy floor, her gaze sweeping over the crowd before landing on the figure standing opposite her. God Serena was everything the legend said. He was a flamboyant, theatrical presence, striking a ridiculous pose. His face contorted in a parody of divine ecstasy. Ooh, the lovely Titania herself, gracing me with her presence. To what do I owe this divine pleasure? Has my Venly radiance finally captured your heart? His voice was grating, his arrogance a palpable force. 8 different, powerful magical auras swirled around him, a chaotic and mismatched symphony of power. I am here to see justice done. Serena, Erza said, her voice cold and clear, cutting through his theatrics. She drew a simple steel sword. Let us begin. As you wish, my darling. He cackled. He struck another pose, his hands held aloft. A scorching wind filled the arena. Let's start with a classic. Purgatory Dragon's Blazing Hell. He unleashed a massive, swirling vortex of black and purple fire. A signature move that had supposedly incinerated an entire dark guild. It roared towards Erza, a tsunami of infernal heat. Erza stood her ground. Confuse it, Naruto's voice echoed in her mind. Requip. A flash of light. Her simple armor was gone, replaced in an instant by her Flame Empress armor. The dragon-like suit glowed with a magical resistance to fire. She met the vortex of flame head-on. Her enchanted sword cleaving through the attack, parting the flames around her like water. She burst through the firestorm, completely unharmed. God Serena's eyes widened. Ooh, a costume change. How delightful. He shifted his magic instantly. The air grew heavy and wet. But can you handle this? Sea King Dragon's encircling deluge. A colossal wave of high-pressure water erupted from the ground, crashing down on Erza's position. But she was already changing. Requip. The Flame Empress armor vanished, replaced by her Sea Empress armor, granting her mastery over water. She didn't block the wave, she controlled it, turning the massive attack into 2 watery whips that she lashed back at God Serena. He laughed, swatting them aside. How fun. But I have 8 of these, my dear. He stomped his foot, and the very ground began to tremble. Cavern Dragon's geologic labyrinth. The stone floor of the arena erupted, massive pillars of rock shooting up to form a complex, shifting maze around Erza, trapping her. But even as the walls were closing in, she was already a blur of light. Requip. Flight armor. Her speed increased tenfold. She shot upwards, easily evading the shifting rock maze, and appeared high above the arena. The crowd was on its feet, roaring. They had never seen Erza fight like this. She wasn't just changing armors to counter his attacks, she was changing before his attacks even fully formed. Her speed, her precognition, was supernatural. She was making the most powerful wizard in Ishgar look like a clumsy amateur. From the shadows, Naruto watched with a proud smirk. She wasn't just countering, she was using her requip speed to stay 1 step ahead of God Serena's own mental shift between his 8 magics. She was fighting a psychological battle, and she was winning. God Serena's theatrical grin was finally beginning to strain. His frustration was mounting. Enough games, he roared, his arrogance cracking. Let's see you handle this. Lightning dragons. He never finished. This was the moment she had been waiting for. This was Naruto's idea. High in the air, she didn't requip into a defensive armor. Requip. The night. But she didn't summon a dozen swords. She summoned hundreds. 1,000. The sky above the arena darkened as a storm of steel materialized, a shimmering, deadly cloud of every blade she possessed, all of them pointed downwards at one man. You talk about dragons. Erza's voice boomed, amplified by the sheer force of her magic. You wield their power. But you have forgotten something, Serena. She pointed her own sword down at him. Heaven's wheel. Pentagram's sword. The 1,000 blades in the sky ignited with holy light and rained down, not in a chaotic storm, but in a precise, inescapable cage of light and steel, forming a perfect, blazing pentagram on the arena floor with God Serena at its center. He was trapped. His lightning dragon magic sputtered against the holy attribute of the attack. You have forgotten, Erza's voice whispered. As she appeared behind him, her blade at his throat, that knights slay dragons. Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. The crowd, the council, Chairman Org, all of them stared, their minds unable to process what they had just witnessed. Titania Erza Scarlet had defeated the unbeatable God Serena without taking a single hit. She had dismantled him with pure skill, speed, and strategy. God Serena stood frozen, a single drop of sweat tracing its way down his temple. The tip of Erza's blade was cold against his skin. He had lost. The trial is over, Erza declared, her voice ringing with finality. Judgment is rendered. Quote, Chairman Org's face was a mask of pure, apoplectic rage. His plan, his perfect, flawless plan, had been shattered. He slammed his fist down on his balcony. This changes nothing. The trial was a farce. The threat remains. He was cut off by a new voice. A lazy, amused drawl that echoed through the silent arena. Now, Org. Let's not be a sore loser. You played by the rules. You lost. It's a bit troublesome, but that's how the game works. Every head snapped towards the source of the voice. Seated in a previously empty section of the stands, lounging as if he were at a picnic, was a man with shaggy black hair and a perpetually tired expression. His presence was so unassuming that no one had even noticed his arrival. But the moment he spoke, every powerful mage in the stadium felt a chill run down their spine. This was a man whose magical power was so vast, it felt like a physical law of the universe. Gildarts. Makarov breathed from the stands, his eyes wide. Gildarts Clive, the ace of fairy tale. The only one to have ever undertaken and returned from a 100-year quest. A man whose power was so immense and destructive, the entire city of Magnolia had to literally reconfigure itself whenever he came home, just to prevent him from accidentally leveling it. Gildarts gave a lazy wave. I was in the neighborhood, heard my little Erza was in a spot of trouble. Looks like she had it handled, though. He turned his gaze to Chairman Org, and his lazy smile vanished. The sheer pressure of his gaze was a physical blow. But I have to say, I'm not a fan of this new council. Picking on my family, it's just distasteful. He then turned his eyes to the center of the arena. They passed over Erza, a flicker of fatherly pride in them, before landing on Naruto, who had stepped out of the shadows to stand beside her. Gildarts' lazy expression sharpened. He sat up, his full attention focused on Naruto. Like Makarov, he felt the impossible paradox of Naruto's power. But he also felt something else. A kinship, a resonance. His own crash magic was a power of deconstruction. Naruto's sun dragon magic was a power of chaotic, overwhelming creation. They were two sides of the same cosmic coin. So, Gildarts said, his voice holding a new note of genuine curiosity. You're the one. The sun dragon. He gave Naruto a long, appraising look. You feel interesting. Before anyone could react to this new, terrifying development, something else happened. The defeated god Serena, still standing in the center of the arena, began to laugh. It started as a low chuckle, then grew into a full-blown, unhinged cackle. Oh, this is just too divine. He shrieked, his flamboyant persona returning, but now twisted into something manic and cruel. Titania, the ace of fairy tale, and a new little sun god, all gathered in one place. It's a feast. He threw his head back, and his body began to glow with a dark, malevolent light. You think you beat me? You beat a jester. His face contorted, his features shifting. But you haven't met the god. The 8 draconic energies within him suddenly harmonized, merging into a single, overwhelming aura of pure, black power. It was a power that dwarfed his previous state. It was a power that made even Gildarts's eyes widen. It was the power of acknowledge. Zirf gave me this power. He screamed, his voice distorting. The power to be a true dragon god. He had been a spy all along. A member of the Spriggan 12, planted within the Magic Council itself. He lunged, not at Erza, but at Naruto. He was the unknown variable. The greatest threat, but he never made it. A figure appeared between them in a blur of motion. A hand, missing its arm, shot out and slammed into God Serena's chest. Crash. The sound was not an impact. It was the sound of something fundamental breaking. God Serena's dark aura shattered. The very magic composing his attack was deconstructed into raw, useless particles. He was sent flying backward, crashing into the arena wall with enough force to crack solid stone, knocked completely unconscious. Gildart stood there, his prosthetic arm still smoking slightly from the force of his own magic. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. What a drag, all that monologuing. The arena was in chaos. The council guards were in an uproar. A Spriggan 12 infiltrator in their midst. But Naruto wasn't focused on that. He was looking at Gildarts, and then back at the unconscious God Serena. An idea, a terrible and brilliant solution, was forming in his mind. He's a key, Naruto said suddenly. Gildarts and Erza both turned to him. What are you talking about, kid? Gildarts asked. The arbiter who attacked my village, Naruto explained quickly. Its last words were, the Weaver sees the wound. It wasn't just a threat. It was a clue, a wound, a tear in reality. He looked at the still form of God Serena. This guy was given power by Zirf, one of your world's magical anomalies. He's a walking contradiction, a human with 8 dragon magics. He's another wound. And Sasuke, my friend with the space-time eyes, he can track those kinds of wounds. Erza's eyes widened as she understood. You think you can use him to find the Weaver? Not just find it, Naruto said, a grim determination on his face. If the Weaver is a being of pure order, then a being of pure counter. Addiction, like him, might be the only thing that can get us into its domain. He's not just a key, he's a lockpick. This was their chance, not just to defend, but to attack. To take the fight directly to the entity that was trying to erase them. Gildarts let out a low whistle. Kid, I have no idea what half of that meant. But it sounds like you're planning on picking a fight with a god. He grinned, a wide, reckless expression that was pure fairy tale. Count me in. This is way more interesting than a 100-year quest. He looked from Naruto to Erza, at their hands that were now clasped together. He saw their shared resolve. The power that flowed between them. He had seen power his whole life. But this was different. This was destiny. Amidst the chaos of a collapsing political structure and the revelation of a traitor. A new plan was forged. A quest not for treasure or glory, but for the very heart of their enemy. Later that evening, after the council had been thrown into disarray and macaw, Rav had secured custody of the unconscious god Serena, his council evidence. After all, he'd argued with a sly grin. Naruto and Erza finally had a moment alone. The victory in the arena felt hollow, overshadowed by the new, daunting path ahead. They were in the quiet gardens behind the now chaotic council building. The air was cool and smelled of night-blooming jasmine. Are you sure about this? Erza asked, her voice laced with worry. Hunting a god in its own realm, it's madness. Probably, Naruto admitted with a shrug. But it's better than waiting for it to come hunt us. And we won't be alone. We have your guild. We have Gildarts. And back in my world, I have friends who can shake the heavens. He sounded so confident, so sure. But she could see the weight of it in his eyes. The burden of yet another world-ending threat falling onto his shoulders. She reached out, her hand covering his, where the fairy tale mark rested. You're not just a guest here, Naruto. You're not just an ally. You're one of us. This burden isn't just yours to carry. She looked him in the eye, her heart in her gaze. We carry it together. The sincerity, the absolute commitment in her voice, was an anchor in the storm of his life. He had spent so long being the pillar, the one everyone else leaned on. To have someone offer to share that weight, To stand beside him not as a subordinate or a follower, but as an equal, it was everything. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles, right over her own blue gild mark. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Then, with a resolve that mirrored her own, he looked at her, a serious, profound question in his eyes. It wasn't born of victory or passion, but of the quiet, certain knowledge that he could not, and would not, face this future without her. Erza, he began, his voice low and steady. When this is all over, when we've dealt with the Weaver and secured both our worlds, will you marry me? The question hung in the air, more powerful than any spell, more binding than any law. Erza's breath caught in her throat. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She looked at this impossible man from another world, his sun dragon who had crashed into her life and illuminated everything. She saw his strength, his kindness, his unwavering loyalty. She saw her future. A slow, brilliant smile spread across her face, a smile of such pure, unadulterated joy that it outshone the moon. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Naruto, I will. Chapter 6 End.